overall, as an artist, I tend to lean toward the collaborative kinds of art. So that's the whole reason I'm actually interested in filmmaking in particular, is because I feel like it is one of the most in real time collaborative sort of endeavors, and every single job, like every role on a set is just, it's like clockwork.
Ashley Deuell, I would say about maybe 2 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. I met her at one of the filmmaking network parties here in Denver. And when I met her, I immediately clicked with her. We were talking about movies and acting and writing and the frustration of writing. And I remember leaving that party and just being like, man, she is so cool. And this isn't the first time this has happened to me, where I immediately make a connection with someone and I'm afraid of scaring them off, because you don't want to just meet someone and them to be like, hey, do you want to be my best friend? No, you're gonna scare people. So, we were internet friends, and I just kept seeing that she was in different short films and really was going for her dream. And finally I was like, I need to work with Ashley on something. And then I started this day-to-day podcast, and I was like, let me ask her if she'll be on the show. And then I was also creating a podcast pilot for one of the local newspapers in town.
On Saturday, December 7th. Meowgarita, anyone? The Snowcats Cat Convention isn't a cat show per se, though there will be cats. Lots of cats. The format more closely resembles a fan con, with special guests, workshops, a cat-centric vendor hall, and immersive cat art rooms. Adoptable cats will be on display, and there will be a cat cafe experience.
So that podcast pilot didn't turn out like how I thought it would, and that's the important thing about being a creative, is exploring ideas and seeing how they actually turn out. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, so I asked Ashley to be on the podcast, and she said yes, but that she was moving to California, so I had to pick a date fast. And we sat down, we talked, and it was just an amazing conversation. My idea initially was to have these episodes shorter, but I like what we talked about so much that I'm actually just going to keep it as a long version. So I really hope you enjoy, and thank you for listening.
So during the quarantine, my boyfriend and I, he's also a filmmaker, we decided we were going to make a short. And so I've never actually worked with a camera before.
Oh, really?
Myself. So it came time for his scenes, right? And we didn't want them to be static. We wanted them to be handheld. And I was just like, oh my God, this thing weighs 300 pounds.
Right.
And I don't know what I'm doing. And it's really fun though. It's been really fun.
Yeah. So wait, so is it like you two are in a scene together and then you go and hold the camera and then it looks like he's looking at you, or?
Oh, no, we haven't done that yet. It was just his scene where he was alone on camera, and we were gonna do a static, and then I was like, no, we gotta, it can't just be a static. If we make this short and all of the shots are static, that will just suck. So
right.
Plus we wanted it to have that feel of you're really there, not just watching it. So I started trying to do my own camera work, and it was a great adventure.
I honestly, so I think we've talked about this before, but I'm pretty new in terms of, I've always done creative stuff, but I think I touched my first camera for real, started to work with it 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember, because I started working for this company kind of as just a PA, and he was like, here, try putting this lens on this camera and tell me, let's see how it looks. And I was like, okay. And I just
started pressing buttons and messing with it.
Like
Just,
trying to figure
figured
it
out
out.
my way along, and I was like, oh, interesting. That's how you swap out a lens on a
Oh,
camera.
cool. Yeah, yeah.
And it really was just like, all right, figure it out, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
And like, it's been wonderful because I've realized that kind of pressure, like, really like taught me to like kind of like key in, right?
Yes.
Because it's one thing to like take a class and to be like, you know, this is how you just change out a lens and this is how you do sound.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically with what we were doing like Facebook live streams that we would also be filming it. You know, so it's
Okay.
only happening once.
Yeah.
Or the biggest one we had, which to me was an accomplishment, was the person I work for, they did a speaking engagement where they spoke for like, I think it was like 400 people, and it was only an hour long, you know, so it's like, there's no reshooting, there's no retake,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I just like was in the zone, and it's because like you have to be, you
Yeah,
know? And then
definitely.
like afterwards, finally like my heart slowed down and stuff, you know? And now I can actually like handle that stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm like excited by the challenge.
Totally.
Because totally I was pretty afraid. like,
Yeah.
at first.
Oh,
you know?
definitely. Definitely. That's how I was feeling too. I was like, well, actually, the very truth of that story, like the first night that I tried working with the camera, because I'm the type of person who's just like, if I'm not instantly good at something, I get so frustrated at myself, which is really ridiculous because
Right.
something like camera work takes years and years and years to
Right,
like
right.
even begin to master. So the first night that we were filming, I was like so distraught, and I was just like, I'm done. I don't want to make this anymore. And then like an hour later, after I'd calmed down, and I was like, okay,
Right.
that was my first time ever.
Yeah.
You know, we looked at the footage and the next day, and it really wasn't so bad. And so
Right.
I was just like, okay,
Yeah.
I need to chill out.
Trying to get that like inner voice to be like more kind is like a
Yes.
pretty big ordeal.
Oh my
why
gosh.
do you think you have that like if I'm not good at it right off the get-go?
I couldn't tell you where it comes from. I'm a believer that a lot of the things that we struggle with in adulthood really start in our childhood somewhere. So
Right.
I'm assuming it was something in my childhood, in my past, some sort of pressure to need to be kind of perfect or right all the time, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been an interesting journey for sure, because it is so debilitating, like to have that feeling of you must be instantly good at this thing, and if you're not, you
Right.
shouldn't even try. It's like writing, for example. I used to love writing, and I'm pretty good at it, and I was then. I mean, I could be again. But I started writing a screenplay, like for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And I've gotten through maybe like 5 or 6 pages now, and it's just so discouraging to come back to and feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. But like, you just got to get it down. You just
Right.
got to get it on the page, edit it later.
Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Well, especially with screenplay writing in particular, because it's like, to me, I have a hard time going from like character to character. You know, like I worked on writing like informative scripts, right? Of like, okay, so for a podcast, this is your intro, this is your middle, you know, just say
Yeah.
that. But when it's characters, it's like there's like an ebb and flow that I think just takes
Right.
time. And like I'm getting better at it, but I also found out I work better with someone where we literally just go through and just say like, okay, what do they say? And it's like, no, they wouldn't say that. And it's like a slow process, but I found out that works better for me than being alone.
That's a really good idea, because I overall, as an artist, I tend to lean toward the collaborative kinds of arts. That's the whole reason I'm actually interested in filmmaking in particular, is because I feel like it is one of the most in real time collaborative
Right.
sort of endeavors, and every single job, like every role on a set, it's like clockwork. Like you need this little piece and this little piece and this little piece, and you see it happening all around you.
Right.
And I think there's like nothing more magical than that.
Yeah. It's like a painting, and all of it needs to move at the exact same time.
Yes.
Otherwise it doesn't work.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
I just did another episode of Really Late Night that hasn't come out yet. I just put it out to the patrons. I have a Patreon. And I ended up thanking everyone in the credits, but then I also went back and was like just putting in like who helped with sound on this day, who helped with lighting, and it's remarkable. You know, there's like 30 names on the credits, and that's for like just my show that mostly I like create and run like from the writing side, you know? But in order to really make it work, you need like 30 people, you know? Like
Right. It's like when you're watching any film and you start to watch those credits roll. It's just it's like a novel of people.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so incredible. I just love that so much.
Do you because I know you've been acting for like a lot longer like than I have.
How long have you been acting?
Let's see, what time is it? It's like 3:30, so like I think at like 12:45 I started, and who knows that thing. I was just running lines in here, and I was like, so you know what's interesting? I mean, I don't know if I should qualify what's interesting and what's not. What I think is funny is that I was actually really insecure about saying that I liked acting, even though I had been doing it for like a couple years. And it wasn't until I asked my friend he was running acting classes in Studio A, and I was like, hey, would it be possible for me to like take one of your classes? And similar to like my alcoholism, where it was like I was almost the last to know in this weird way. You know?
Yes.
And it's something you know, but you don't fully admit. You know?
Interesting.
So even though I've been doing like comedy sketches and acting in all sorts of ways, I kind of didn't really like embrace it until like recently, like this past year.
So what did you kind of define yourself as artist-wise beforehand?
I think for a bit I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a comedian, right?
Okay.
And then I tried doing some stand-up and it didn't work because so much of my stuff is more like stories. It just did not transfer well, you know?
Yeah, okay.
And I also didn't like the idea of like going to open mics and like working into that hierarchy. Like I kind of did that in my 20s of like trying to break into the music world, and it's exhausting to like break into a scene specifically, you know, which is I think separate than like working on your career. When you're trying to like make friends and work deals, it's too exhausting for me.
Okay.
I don't have that time. So the late night show is nice because then I could just make it by myself, pretty much, you know?
Right.
And like, we have like a work trade culture here at Denver Open Media. So it's like, if you help me with your shoot, then I'll help you with, if you help me with my shoot, I'll help you with your shoot. You hold the mic, then I'll hold the mic, and we'll just all like kind of work outside of money, you know? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess in the last like maybe 2 years, it's like, okay, I'm both like writer and actor and director. So I'm kind of like Miranda July, like I was saying before, is like a big inspiration to me, the way she's like in it but directs it, and just like there's only like a handful of people that do that, and I kind of don't know any other way. So these days I'm more like, okay, I'm an actor and director.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. I mean, I think anymore it's becoming absolutely necessary to make your own work.
Right.
So that's a hurdle of mine for sure, because I really am very reliant on this collaboration piece. And so for me, it's like, since that's sort of the bread and butter, I'm so afraid to make my own anything.
Right.
So it's just going to take a lot of practice and time and just really forcing yourself to do it. And I mean, that's something that, like you said, even just having one person to kind of like push you along and help you out with it, like that's been really helpful for me too. But I want to get to a point where, you know, I just feel confident enough to jump into a project solo, ready to go.
Yeah.
You know, and then I think too, the important thing about when you do jump into your own project is you can ask feedback from other people, you know, that's kind of like part of it. So,
and also takes like major guts. Like my
definitely.
friend, he sent me a link to his film that he wanted feedback on, and I was like, whoa, thank you for including me. And two, mad props on having the guts to ask for feedback, you know?
Definitely.
It's like part of that, like being humble while you're like learning or while you're creating.
Oh my gosh, I have a bunch of friends, or I guess I would say colleagues, who send me things, who send me scripts that they're writing, who send me, clips of something and ask me for my advice. One of those people is Hayden Winston. He's an actor here in Denver. He also does stuff in New Mexico. He's constantly creating things. I mean, he's definitely kind of an inspiration to me, actually, because he's just constantly writing, constantly putting together like really short films with very small crews, maybe just him and one other person, or just him and two other people.
Yeah.
And then just churning stuff out left and right, And so it's just really, it's remarkable. I just think that's remarkable. I think it's remarkable that you do it as well.
Yeah, I think like, I don't know. It's hard because I think you're right that, these days you got to be able to make it and be in it. It does help. But also there's something to be said about being able to like really dig into one part of it, right? Because there are actors, and even my friend, he's like a camera guy, and he's tried writing scripts, and he's just like, the dialogue sucks. I don't know about stories. He like kind of doesn't care about stories in a weird way.
Okay.
Like he cares about the way it looks, and that's like his strength.
Well, and I think visual storytelling too is a very different sort of thing than like a dialogue and character development,
right.
And I just think those are two very different types of storytelling. But yeah, go ahead with what you were saying.
And it's funny too. And I'm sure everyone still gets nervous or anxious. Do you still have that when you're like coming into a new project?
Oh my
and,
gosh,
what does that look like?
So for me, I tend to it's funny, once I'm actually on set, it's like the best day of my life,
Right.
It's the best feeling. There's nothing like it at all. But when I first get a script sent to me for a project, I go from very excited to, oh no, what am I doing? Can I do this? I read the script and I'm like, why do they think I can do this? Why do they think I can play this character? It's like that Imposter Syndrome is what it is.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But I do find once I actually get a script printed and I start going through and I start doing the process of breaking it down and figuring out who this person is, right? It only goes up from there, and I start to feel more comfortable and I start to feel more excited. But I will also say there is always a moment of dread the night before I go onto a set. It's
really?
Yeah, I'm like, oh
like,
my gosh, what am I doing?
Like type thing, or you're uneasy? I get like stomach stuff where I just like my body is tense.
Yeah.
And it's like, whatever this is, we don't like it. And I'm like, it's going to be fine, y'all.
It is definitely a physical sensation. I would say for me, it's more of like a shutdown. It's like a lethargic, like, I can't possibly bring myself to get out of bed the next day, that kind of thing.
Right.
But it is so silly because every time it happens the same way. And once I get there, it's the best thing that there is. So I don't know why.
That's been the hardest thing about this, like, kind of shutdown too, because I really miss being able to like film with people and like, I'm writing these scenes and I'm like, how much longer is it going to be until I can have everyone back into the studio,
Yeah.
And to me, it really is like the most memorable it's like the memories I have from making films is like the brightest memories because I think I enjoy it so much.
Yeah. Definitely.
And to me, it's like the closest you can have to like playing as an adult, but in the style of a kid. Like we're pretending,
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like funny. I think on this like cosmic level, it's just funny to like pretend with someone that something's happening and do it over and over.
It is really funny, isn't it? If you actually think about what we do, you're like, are you insane? Like, crazy people?
And not to
So
like
funny.
download the importance of it by any means, because there's this really cool like quote by Alan Watts that I think a lot about. It's like, he's like, sometimes people ask like, are you being serious? And what they mean to ask is, are you being sincere? Because just because you're being playful doesn't mean that you're not like sincere.
I love that. I love that.
And to me, like films, when done well, they're like really sincere expressions.
Oh yeah.
And
definitely.
there's like, what's wrong with that? There's like nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. That makes me think about comedy somewhat because I I have always felt really insecure when it comes to comedy in particular.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about how you were doing stand-up, like I think that is the bravest thing
Right.
in the world.
Right, yeah.
A, but B, when I'm on set for a comedy piece, I mean, I think one of the most important things is that you are sincere in that exaggeration.
Right.
And
right.
I've struggled to like reach that balance, but I think it kind of applies to that as well.
No, totally. Yeah, I mean, all of it's hard, but comedy is a bit harder, I think.
So
where
too.
it's just like, if it doesn't land, it just like doesn't land.
Yeah,
you know?
and there's so many elements. It's like timing and what is that director's name? We're talking about
the director.
comedy.
Yeah, what was the director's name of Baby Driver?
The director was Edgar Wright.
Oh, okay, perfect.
And he has this incredible aptitude for timing and putting like using sound and visual cues for like a rhythmic, symphonic kind of feel to his pieces, so that you're not just seeing the comedy, or like not just hearing the comedy, you're seeing it, you're feeling it. It's like very, rhythm centric, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think that is the most difficult part of comedy, is getting that rhythm, is getting that timing and that tempo correct.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if correct is a good word, but getting it sort of like streamlined.
Right.
I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah, and I've always gravitated to comedy that has like a lot of heart in it too, like The Simpsons or like Judd Apatow, like those kind of films.
Yeah.
Like to me, when it doesn't have heart, it's like just like mean and just like, I don't know, or just cheap, like, and that's okay too. Like, and people are allowed to like mean and cheap stuff. Like, I can't. I'm in the movie police.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and like subjectivity is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And it's funny. I'm part of all these Facebook groups, like, comedy writing Facebook groups, and like, I went to this thing called Comedy Business School, which is like online comedy kind of like coaching, right? And I don't want to get in trouble, but the group of people, okay, imagine, how in school there was like a class clown?
Yeah.
Imagine the entire class as class clowns.
Oh no.
And I was just like, that's why I think I stepped back from the identity as comedian, because I was like, I kind of don't vibe with this group of people.
Yeah.
And like a part of it too, I think comedy, a lot of people have like experienced like some sort of like trauma or some sort of thing that has really hurt them, and comedy is a way to kind of deal with it, similar to like any art. And to me, I didn't like start actually becoming like fully creative and fully like making good stuff until I started like got sober, and then also started going to therapy and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just think like the vibe of unprocessed kind of trauma in the comedy world is a bit overwhelming for me.
Interesting. Yeah. I went to the University of Northern Colorado here in Greeley.
Oh, all right.
And I studied theater there for 4 years. And it was a great program in that I got a lot of experience, and I had some really great roles. Like I played Karen in August Osage County, which was probably my favorite role that I ever played. I also played Gwendolyn in The Importance of Being Earnest. It was awesome. But that being said, something about the community there. I liked all of the people as individuals, and then when we were all together in a group, it just felt like it was just that vibe,
Right.
And actually, that was so traumatic for me that it kind of encouraged me to quit acting when I got out of college. So I took a couple years off.
Jeez.
And became a preschool teacher and said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a preschool teacher now.
Right.
Which I loved. And it was kind of similar to acting in a way, because you have to be sort of engaged and on and there the whole time with these little tiny humans who want you to just be like, doing things the whole time. So that was a good experience. But yeah, coming back from that group of people to taking those couple years off to finally meeting everybody I've met in the Denver film community through Colorado Film School, through Denver Open Media, through a ton of different venues or, resources. So much better. Those people, I was like, yes, those
Yeah.
are my people, and they really are. And I realized people say like bloom where you're planted. I think that can be true in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a lot of other ways though, you need your sunlight, you need your water, you need your nutrients, and
Right.
you get that from your environment, from the people around you, from your collaborators and the people that you're working with.
Yeah.
And so
Well, and yeah, my past year has been just filled with meeting just amazing people, you know, that are
Yeah.
like so in tune with like something bigger.
Mhm.
And then on the other hand, too, it's also like kind of littered with more people who are not that great, who I think as I've gotten older, I've been able to kind of like pretty quickly catch on of like, oh, this person seems like they kind of just want it for status, or this person specifically just told me they only do camera work for the money and they make a lot of money, and then it's this conversation that only them talking about how much money they make doing camera work,
Yeah.
and I'm like standing there like holding my like Red Bull or LaCroix, like I need to figure out a way out of this conversation, because this person's not interested in stories, they're not
No.
interested in like truth. Like they're interested about like money, which is fine too, like, and I don't think those two things are separate,
Yeah.
but it's like it's become obvious to me more and more of like kind of finding people you click with, you know.
I mean, I think making money doing this work is the bonus level. Like
Right.
if you are making money doing this work, then you have done the thing that is extra, right?
Mhm.
But just doing the work itself, that's where the magic is.
Right.
And I feel like there are tons of people who don't see it that way, or there are people who lose sight of it. I think that happens more frequently than people who just never felt it to begin with. Which is one reason I'm a little bit apprehensive about moving to LA, because I know there's going to be a whole slew of people who just feel jaded and broken
Right.
down and beat down, and like the artist in them has been like pummeled down to the ground so much that they
Right.
just feel like they forgot why they're there, or you know
Yeah.
what they're doing, and I just don't ever want to forget.
I mean, on the reverse side too, like, because I lived in New York for a bit, and it took me about 2 weeks to realize that everyone is something else. So they're a waiter, but they're also a filmmaker. They're like,
Yeah.
they work in an office, but they're also a photographer, you know?
Right.
And that kind of energy is super valuable too.
Oh,
That I
yeah.
think sometimes that you, like, you know, maybe in a city like Denver, I have it because of the people I've seeked out, you know, but that kind of dual life, I don't know if it exists as much here as maybe some of the other like bigger industry cities.
Yeah, definitely.
I've just always like clicked with people who have like big dreams and are going for it, you know? Like
Yeah.
to me, I think like one thing that and I didn't think I would talk about it, but we'll just go anyways.
Yeah.
Like one of my really good friends when I was in New York, he struggled with a lot, and he did end up like he like ended his own life, you know? I think these days we call them deaths of despair instead of suicide. But my friend, he like, you know, he committed suicide, and that was like a pretty big, it was a shock to me. And it also put into perspective of the importance of kind of just going for what you want, right? You know, because there is this like
Sorry.
idea. Oh God, no.
It's not Corona.
You're right. See, that's.
I'm sorry, it's
for
not.
people. Yeah, for people watching or listening, we're on the tail end of I think our stay-in-home order.
Yes.
And the last thing you want to do is cough.
I know, I had to. Okay, sorry, back to what we were
But
saying.
you know, in like that kind of that losing that kind of footing on reality, kind of like showed me that I need to stay committed to kind of following what I want.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and these days I'm a little better at having like a kind of a semi-rational plan and a semi-irrational plan. You know, so like balancing those two.
Yeah.
But if I could be totally irrational plan all day long, I would. You know?
Yeah, definitely. That
But
is-
I really, I respect your move, and I think it's great, you know?
Thank you.
And I wish I like kind of befriended you earlier.
I know.
You know?
I
like,
do
messed
know.
up.
I know.
I just like, you know, I want to collaborate with people, and I didn't have anything that I thought we could collaborate on like immediately, you know?
Yeah.
And then I probably should have just been like, hey, do you want to hang out, you know, or something?
Yeah.
But I also didn't want to like scare you, you know, like, because I think like
No.
also, guys are creepy in general. So like, if someone was like, I'm all right, I would be like, you know what? Cool. Our track record as a species isn't great.
Yeah, like I totally get it. No. I was really glad you reached out to me, and we went to lunch that day.
Mm-hmm. That was so much fun.
It was so much fun. And I feel like I knew right away you were the type of person who wants to just make things because you want to make them.
Right.
Not because you want any sort of recognition or,
Yeah.
success, quote unquote. You just want to be making things, and you want to be making things with friends or people that you admire. And I just think that's really, really great.
Yeah. I mean, I think similarly, I think when we met at that Find meeting, the like film Denver industry meetup, it like, I don't know what it was about you, but I also like could sense that like acting is something you really care about.
Yeah.
And that like there was like such a cool and like calm, exciting like vibe you had. I was like, man, I don't know what her deal is, but she's cool
that
as heck.
night I was definitely overwhelmed. There were so many people in there. I was just like, we need to go out back. and then I meet you. Yeah, It was great.
Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it takes courage to really go for it, and also it comes in waves. A couple years as a teacher, or for the longest time, I was working in coffee shops and like movie theaters.
Right.
And it wasn't until like the last 3 years I've been working professionally as an editor, and then creatively as like a filmmaker. So it's like, and what would that look like if you had the chance to just commit to it?
Right.
Because my life was pretty like foggy in my 20s and very unfocused, which it should be in some ways, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're really figuring things out. 20s have been really difficult.
Yeah.
20s have been hard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I remember being younger, and I always wanted to be older, right? I was always the kid who just wanted to be 16 or 20 or however old already. And everybody said, like, the 20s, college, those are the best times of your life. And I get there, and so far it's been really difficult, but it's also been really rewarding because of how much I've grown. If I think about how much I've grown, even just between this year and last year, I mean, not to get overly personal, but I was strongly considering just not being here anymore. That's a huge leap, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like I wouldn't still be here without the people that I've come to love, that I've kind of formed. Again, going back to all of that, I think even just collaboration in your life is really, really important.
Yeah. I think in order to like, I forget, I was at this movie screening, and there was kind of a talk beforehand, but the point was that there was like this teacher that said that in order to kind of like really start to appreciate things, you have to get to a point where you do experience despair,
Yeah.
And like with me, did one of the lights just flicker? Is that
Yeah, that one's been flickering.
Okay. I'm gonna throw a little battery in it.
I don't know for how long. Probably for a while. Wait, how old are you?
I am 32.
32.
I just turned 32.
That seems like a good age.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I kind of had this Fry from Futurama thing going on. Or I'll start this idea from the beginning.
Okay.
So yeah, I just turned 32 a couple months ago, and I feel like I have this Fry from Futurama thing going on. I tried to not make it sound exactly the same. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did.
So when I first got sober, which was more than coming up on 4 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a big deal.
Big change to go from not having almost anything left to being able to do like these kinds of things. It's like, it really is just like beyond like the gratitude I experience is like overwhelming a lot at times, and like, so when I got sober, I kind of felt like I was like 23 or something, because I felt like so foggy, and emotional maturity. I was still like very like young, even though I was older. Didn't do well with confrontation or, taking responsibility for things.
Yeah.
So it's been like I've aged in like 10 years and 3 years, like
Wow.
maybe, hopefully not too much in my looks, but more in my soul.
I think you look fantastic.
Oh, thank you. You look amazing too.
Goodness.
Look at us.
Goodness. Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, for real, like, I was just so beat up near the end, and like, I just, I really like got to a point where I almost lost my job, I almost lost my apartment, and I just was like, I would have been totally okay if I like didn't live anymore. It was like, I was more than willing, to just like be done.
Yeah.
And like, even like last week, I was just editing some of the footage of all the places that I've been in the past 2 years and like weird odd jobs.
Yeah.
And all of them together, it's like really like beautiful to be like putting it together like that and just being like, holy shit, you almost left and you almost missed like all of this stuff,
Yeah.
Like I filmed like this beautiful like Mexican singer who just had this like voice that was like amazing. I got a job filming like this Comic-Con where everyone was like dressed up and dancing and like having fun together, like I can feel like I'm also very sensitive, so at some point I'll probably cry. And just like all of those things together, I was like, holy shit, dude, you almost left, like,
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think a part of that too is just like dealing with stuff, and I just didn't have any coping mechanisms, right? So drinking was like the way I coped. And like ideally, it's good to be here now,
Yeah, definitely.
How is kind of your like sensitivity kind of like work into acting or to like your relationship to it, because I know that not everyone's like empathic or that we all kind of land on different sides of that.
Yeah, so because of that sort of episode I was just explaining earlier about how I was also considering not being here anymore, which I wonder how many other artists have that consideration or have had that consideration. I think it's probably more than not, would be my guess.
Well, and when you said imposter syndrome, I think it affects like like Latinos, women, like the Black community, even though especially like Black men are not allowed to experience any of those. I think for anyone who experiences imposter syndrome, I think it must happen at some point.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, it was also a journey of learning about my genetics and how much that comes into play with mental health. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I just basically found out that I've been bipolar my whole life, and I didn't really know until this year. So for me, I have always had trouble regulating emotions. I've always had trouble with actually, there's kind of not a funny story. Well, it's funny to me. So
well, and I think they get funnier the further we get away from them, over time.
Definitely. In high school, I wanted to be a part of this like elite theater group. Both of my teachers pulled me into their office and they said, Ashley, you're so talented. We would love to have you in this group, but there's just one problem. And I was like, okay, so what is it? And they were like, everything that you feel, everyone else around you feels that too. And I was like, wow, I don't have any control over that. So, they were basically saying anytime you feel these sort of low, sad, discouraged emotions, it rubs off on the people around you. And I always found that to be so insulting at the time.
Right.
But now I think it sort of speaks to my empathy and the level that I can feel what other people are feeling, that they can feel through me what I'm feeling, and that sort of connection. So for me, I think that's where the sensitivity comes in, is just it's really being able to and it sounds so cheesy to say this, but like listen to the soul of another person and be able to tell stories through that. I think that's one of the reasons that I gravitate toward acting the most.
Right.
And I think that's why I feel like I'm pretty adequate at that compared to some of the other filmmaking elements we were talking about earlier. But,
Right. Yeah, really connecting with that story part. Yeah, I feel like that's like oddly similar, because for a long time I kind of had this idea of it's my, whatever I do on my own time is my thing, and like I don't really affect others, right? Like, it's, I can drink if I want, it's not your body, it's mine, like that kind of thing. So there is something to be said about, like, I could see that a group being like affected by other people's emotions, but that doesn't seem like very fair if you're not in on it,
No,
and if you weren't aware of
definitely.
this,
Definitely.
And I think like it's so cool because even in the past 5 years, people are like talking about it so much more, like being open if they have like, if they're bipolar or, having like addiction issues, And even today on the drive over, I was like, okay, what are we going to talk about? And I was just thinking of like, we all have these things that make us like different, like growing up, I wanted to be special,
Yeah.
and it turns out I am special.
Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic. And when I found out, it was like, no, I don't want to be that kind of special.
Yeah,
And they're
no.
like, you wanted to be special.
The universe playing dirty tricks on you.
Similar, like, and my mom doesn't listen to this, but, my mom's an alcoholic, my dad's an alcoholic. It's just all through my family. So it's one of those things, too, where it's like, you want to have gratitude that you're alive, but it's like, how come I have this almost setback, you know? And nowadays it's like, yeah, it is my setback, but it also has like taught me so much. And it's taught me how to be like sympathetic to people who are, maybe addicted to shopping or addicted to food, or maybe it's not even addiction. It's like, that's just how they cope,
Yeah.
Whereas when I was in high school, I was like really arrogant and like pious because I was straight edge, right? So since my parents drank, I was like, I'm never drinking, I'm never doing drugs.
Wow.
I'm better than everyone on top of it, right? And then you just like fast forward the tape a little and it's like, oh, you have the same thing.
Yep.
And now you finally understand. And I feel like I can like connect with people now.
Yeah, definitely.
And, I'm still like not totally grateful for it. I think that comes later.
Well, and absolutely. I there are so many days where I wake up and I just wish I could just be normal, And I think I have to believe that everyone feels that way sometimes,
Right.
But I also really believe that artists feel that way more often than anyone. I think there is that sort of, and it's so strange to me because there is so much collaboration, there's so much communication and connection, but there's also that feeling of, man, I'm really alone in this, or like I'm really on my own, and I don't know. Those two things are really hard to reconcile sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always been like a certain heaviness to me, and I always thought that was just the way that I am, like in my most authentic form. But I think that it was more to do with mental illness than it was to do with who I really am.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But those things get really confusing too, because it's like, if I didn't have this sort of element to me, how would my life have been different throughout these years? And then would I have been drawn to make films? Would I have met the same people that I met? Would I have, even if I had a similar experience, would it have been the same outcome?
Right.
I'm always really curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, I was thinking about this the other day, that if I told like 10-year-old me what I do now for a living, I think 10-year-old me would be pretty impressed.
Yeah.
I think if I told like 16-year-old me what I do, 16-year-old me would be kind of confused but impressed.
Yeah.
And I think it's because like now that I'm more in comedy and I'm in like absurdity, there's like not really a coolness to it, which I'm grateful for. You know?
Like that goofy, quirky.
Right.
Yeah.
And even, the other day my cousin talked to me and it was like, he doesn't listen to this podcast either, so he called me. He was a little intoxicated, and he's just like, I don't understand what the hell you're doing. Like, you're just like a clown. I don't get it. Like, what are you doing? And to me, it's like, I think it's okay to like be playful and like not take yourself super seriously.
It's necessary to
Right.
not take yourself too seriously. And sometimes I even struggle with that. And it's not even taking myself seriously like I think I'm the best. I actually wrote a blog post about this a few years ago, but I call it the Negative Narcissist. And it's like when you have these sort of like repeated phrases of like a negative nature that you tell yourself every day, all the time, you're missing out on these connections with other people. You're missing out on the environment around you because you're still so focused in on yourself. And so I feel like it's the same thing as someone who is narcissistic and in like a very arrogant or pompous sort of way.
Right. Yeah, I always have articles coming up like in my feed about narcissism, and I've always been worried that I have it, And
Yes.
and at the end of the day, I always think about like, because my understanding is that narcissists will like, it's either you're with me or you're against me. And in my life, I'm like always surprised when people are with me. I'm always like, "What? Are you sure you want to like hang out with me?"
Oh yeah.
And like a lot of this stuff is more performative. Like I really like making mugs and putting my face on mugs and then putting pictures of the face in the mug.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's funny. And I don't know if it always comes across for people who don't know me per se.
Okay, I see
And
what
I've
you're
even
saying.
had friends who are like, who you are online is so different than who you are in person.
Yeah. But
And
I
was
feel like that's true for everybody. Like when you kind of
Right.
have a character, because I think essentially that's what you're doing is you're creating this other sort of character or side of you.
Right.
That is your like online presence, and
Yeah.
then another side of you is just you in all of its wholeness. Plus it's hard to capture you in all of your wholeness in
Right.
any
And
medium.
we're also all kinds of things as people. We're
Absolutely.
like sometimes goofy and sometimes serious.
Yeah.
And sometimes really sad and dramatic.
Yeah.
Like
Oh my God. The number of times that I have been called dramatic in my life. Whew, we don't even need to go there.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that up the like argument more or does that just like
For a long time, I felt really, and I think I still have a negative feeling when I hear someone call me dramatic, even if it's in jest. There was always I thought, very kind of cruel intention behind the word dramatic.
Right.
And a lot of the time it felt like it was very invalidating to anything that I was feeling. And as a more sensitive person, that was just really, really a low blow for me because
Right.
I wanted to be this normal person, but I just wasn't.
Right. And also, there's very few like words like that you could call someone that also pertains to their job, right? So it's like
I know.
drama, dramatic,
I
and
know.
you're like, well, okay, wait, what are you really saying here?
Totally. And, there have been people who have said it as like but I think even in acting, that is an insult. You do not want to be
Right.
dramatic.
Yeah.
So,
I think we talked about this when we were at that lunch that one time when we were talking about like being on sets and everyone trying to dial back. Is that true? Were we talking
maybe
about
we
this?
were. Keep going with it.
I was just, in my own productions and in my own performances, I'm always like trying to see if we pull it back just a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
But similarly, I think maybe we were talking about film school movies, like when you first start making them, they're always these over the top, and like the amount of like film festivals I've been in that have been like film school and there's like a gun and like drugs and like someone's getting murdered. it's always like those three categories. And I'm like, everyone, it ain't that dramatic.
Yeah, like doesn't have to be that.
Right.
I think It all depends on the group. It all depends on the story. It all depends on, I mean, there are so many factors there as far as like what makes a good film, especially short films, especially student short films.
Right.
But I have seen some really incredible student short films. I've been in some really incredible student short films.
Yeah, totally.
Colorado Film School is great. I couldn't say enough things about that. I mean, those people in that school, they are some of the most talented, dedicated, hardworking filmmakers out here. And it's a shame because there just needs to be more film in Colorado. There just needs to be.
Yeah.
But there isn't. And
and it feels like we're either like 5 years away from that or 10 years away, or
right.
Or New Mexico blows up or Albuquerque blows up and that's the place.
Which
or
it already
Atlanta,
did, really.
Yeah.
New Mexico is where either people are going to New Mexico or Atlanta or LA or New York. I mean, those are the places they're going.
Yeah.
But I would argue even with that being said, LA has always been the hub for film.
Right, yeah.
And I feel like...
Right, because it's like New York's theater and
right.
LA is like film.
Well, New York also does a lot of TV, you know?
Yeah.
But...
Do you ever... does like... So, when I was in New York, I didn't do any film or anything, and I just feel like I like missed the opportunity. And I know that that's like not a good thought to have, and it's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like I'm basically trying to really like allow those thoughts to have space, because like when I feel like when I push away those things, it kind of just pushes them closer, So it's like, it's okay to like. It's okay to think that I lost opportunities, and it's even okay to say it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of not okay to believe it, And
I
that's
see
like,
what you're saying.
That's where I'm trying to be too, where it's like, yeah, you can think it. How about you think it for 5 minutes and then you not believe it, and then we come back to reality? Because look, like, what is the reality? It's like, here we are talking about acting and film and filming it. It's like,
I know.
It's not that far.
It's so funny. Letting things be what they are has always been one of the most difficult things for me. I think this applies to acting, but it also applies to life. Like, just letting things breathe and be what they are, not trying to change them, not trying to judge yourself for how it's going to be perceived or how you're perceiving it. Because there are a lot of times where you'll think something and then you'll be like, God, you're such a stupid idiot. Why did you think that? And it's like, how is that productive for anything at all? But one of the most effective ways to combat that is to just acknowledge what you're feeling. Feel it.
Yeah.
And not judge it. And it will pass. It's such a conundrum. God, it's really difficult.
Yeah, I know. It's so ridiculous too. And like, I also think about how it's like, it doesn't take much for things to change. Like, it's like in just one day you can go from like working on something small to working on something big, and vice versa. And just like trying to enjoy it. Like, I feel like really content in my life right now too, so that to me is like, okay, that's a marker for success. And I think like this next like generation, like our age, I think if things go better that there'll be like a redefinition of success,
I think so too. I definitely think so too. And I think you can see that already with how often people change jobs anymore. You know, it's really, what is my career? You don't really know what a career is until much, much later. And I feel like that's totally okay. Our lives shouldn't be about working them away either.
That's the craziest thing about this quarantine thing, where people are like, reopen. And it's like, what? Like, as Americans, we are for real crazy about jobs. And proof of this is how often we ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, yeah.
Culturally, we put like a huge premium on like what you do.
Definitely.
And it's like... And I feel like I have a strong work ethic, and I can like respect people who have that. But also on the other hand, it's like, whoa, back off. Like, you love your job that much that you want to like risk it all for it. Or like, these people are taking our jobs, and it's like the job that you complain about because your boss is like a jerk, that job they're taking.
It's tough because I think we have so many systems put in place that are, just not helpful, like the economy and just the way that it's structured, I suppose, and that we do kind of have to risk everything to go back to work right now.
Right.
And a lot of people have been saying, well, that clearly means there's an issue with the economy, not
Right.
an issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and also I think it's a chance, and I'm like a fairly optimistic person, and I hope that this is a chance for us to like really think about what does it mean when your economy can't stop.
Oh, yeah.
Not for a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
not for, it can handle it for a day.
Yeah.
And then after that, you need to like start it back up, like,
Right.
and what does the future look like? And maybe for the first time in humanity's existence, we could actually have a system that could take 2 months off, right?
Right.
Because we have the internet, we have phones, we have all these things.
Yeah.
Right? We have like eventually robots.
I think eventually robots. I think a lot of businesses have realized how much they can do from home now after this quarantine has been happening. I also would I personally really did not like school, any of my schooling, other than I really love learning and I loved being around other people to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But just school itself, I was never a fan.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine being like school-aged during all of this.
Yeah.
I think that would be so, so difficult.
Well, and like, you mean like high school or college?
I
or
mean,
just
any school age.
Right, because we're already fighting to be engaged in school as it is.
Exactly.
But now there's like a computer and a
Exactly.
disaster.
God, I think
there's
back to
still-
college and just like my 300 student lecture halls.
Right.
It's just like, God,
Yeah.
that is not a way to learn, you know?
Right.
It's just not.
Well, I feel really content. Thank
Yeah,
you
I
so
feel like
much
we
for
got a
coming
lot of
by.
stuff. Thank
Casually,
you.
this is what we do. We just meet up, the cameras are set up, and we just, I didn't even
Every
know they
time.
were set up.
I didn't either. Well, thank you so much for having
Yeah.
me. It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
No, this is awesome.